Hey friend! Welcome to Landscape Elevation. This is my third video in a series of 6. In all 6 videos, I talk about why landscape design makes a great side hustle. The first reason was all about how landscape design has low startup costs. And the second reason was how the variable nature of the work itself means variable work for you day to day and job to job. Now today, I'll share with you the third reason why being an independent landscape designer makes for a great side hustle, and that reason is that you can ease into it. That's right, when you start a landscape design business, you can and should start slow. Now, how on earth do you start slow with something you're so excited and eager to get going and get rolling? Well, I'm going to give you the first 3 steps that you can focus on one at a time and in this order to get yourself started as a paid landscape designer. Now, this list presumes that you have at least some landscape experience and or site analysis and plant knowledge. If you have 0 landscape or garden experience, the very first thing you need to do is get yourself some site and plant knowledge. I go into more detail about this in another video called Ways to Learn About Landscape and Plants. So, once you are on your way from going from 0 to at least some landscape and plant knowledge, you can bust into the meat of this video, easing yourself into being a paid landscape designer. So here we go. Number 1 has to do with getting a couple ducks in a row before landing a client. These things are figuring out how much you're going to charge for your landscape design services and the system you'll use for invoicing. I'll say it again. Do these things before you land your first client. Why? So that you can go into your first client situation knowing exactly what you charge for your hourly rate and feel confident in that number. And you'll use this hourly rate number on your invoices when it comes time to invoice. So figuring out your invoicing system now will ensure that you're not hung up with software issues once it comes time to actually produce your first invoice. So starting with the hourly rate that you decide on. I'm not going to lie, especially at first, when you're new to this, it's going to be not easy to feel confident in the hourly rate that you charge for your services. But you have to trust that you've come to that number for a reason, and if the client balks at your hourly rate, then quite simply, they aren't the right client for you because you're not the right designer for them and their budget. I talk more about this in another video called How Much to Charge for Your Landscape Design Services. So, bundled into this first step of deciding your hourly rate is figuring out how you're going to make your invoices. That's how you get paid. You invoice people. So now's the time to figure out whether you're going to write out your invoices by hand on paper or if you're going to use a specific type of software. Writing out an invoice by hand is definitely old school, but it can still be done. You can use a legal pad or a blank sheet of paper, but if you do this, just make absolutely sure you make a copy or take a picture of that invoice that you give to your client before you give it to them. You need an exact replica. Or you can use one of those invoicing books you find at Walmart that makes a carbon copy for you. So there's the paper version or using a software. The software has its benefits. For one, you can find invoice templates within most, if not all, spreadsheet and word processing software available on most personal computers and tablets. Using a pre-made template makes invoicing super easy. You literally just fill in the blanks. Just be sure to save each invoice as a PDF. A PDF means that it can't be, none of the numbers can be edited or accidentally deleted. And then either email the PDF to your client or snail mail them a PDF. Snail mail them a printed version. And then, of course, you'll save that invoice in PDF format to your client's digital file folder on your computer or in the cloud. I hope that wasn't too confusing. So you figured out how much you're going to charge for your for your hourly rate, and you figured out and played around with making an invoice. So now it's time to go get yourself a client. So number 2 of your slow entry into landscape design is landing your very first client. So when I say going to get one, 2 questions you might have. So how do you get one? And number two, should you be choosy with the clients that you could potentially have as clients? As I've said before, the best way to get clients is through word of mouth. So start telling the people you know that you are a landscape designer and you are taking on new jobs right now. If you're not feeling super confident in your design abilities yet, you can be upfront and tell people that you're new to this and you're looking for small projects to build up your portfolio and your experience. This is not something to be ashamed of. In fact, it shows you're honest and you'll be more likely to land smaller, less complicated jobs. And these are actually perfect for right now while you're getting your feet wet with design and the process and dealing with clients. So one thing you can do to stretch yourself into landing a client outside of your family, friends, and coworkers is to go talk to folks who own or work for a local greenhouse or nursery business. Introduce yourself and tell them that you're a designer. Every day, greenhouse and nursery folks come into contact with these customers who love plants. They love being outside and so forth, but oftentimes they need help with design, and they ask the people who work at these greenhouses and nurseries if they know of any designers. And so if you've introduced yourself to these people, that's when they can recall your conversation with them and they can recommend you. Okay, so now, should you be choosy about who you take on as a client? My answer to this will almost always be yes. Why? Because if you listen to and trust your instincts, you will know whether or not you should work for someone once you meet them and spend a little time with them during your initial meeting and site visit. Do you have to listen to the instincts of a first impression? Of course not. If you need the money and or you're just anxious to get going on any job, any job, you may decide to take on an iffy client anyway. And if you do, and it turns out to be a bust, it's not the end of the world. Hopefully just another learning experience for future reference. All right, so lastly, the number 3 way in which you get to ease your way into the new landscape design side hustle is that you get to work through the design process for your first for your first time with just one client. So it's not too overwhelming and you can literally take it one step at a time. With your first job, one of your goals should be to do the very best job that you can do so that you can build up a solid reputation and portfolio of work so that if you want to, you can build up to larger projects and multiple clients later on. You can also ramp up the pace later once you've got your own workflow figured out for yourself. But again, trust me, this is for later. It is just not worth running yourself ragged and into a ditch at the expense of your reputation and the quality of your work that you produce when you're first starting out. So when you're first starting out, taking it slow will help your reputation and the quality of your work. Pacing your first job, or maybe your first few jobs, just one step at a time, allows you to dedicate time and headspace to work through the design process carefully and intentionally because you want a good finished product. And while this might seem too limiting, especially if you begin to have clients knocking down your doors because they've heard about you, remind yourself that it's really about setting up the system now that will allow you to scale later. And it could give you some practice in saying no to people. Plus, if you have any basic economics understanding, you know that this leads to basic supply and demand, which can actually turn you into a commodity that can help you charge more for your services. So, there you have my 3 steps in which you can ease into your landscape design side hustle. So first, figure out how much you're going to charge and practice making an invoice. Second, get yourself your first client. And third, after you get your first client, work through the design process one step at a time to build a system that will allow you to scale your projects and client list later. Or of course, depending on your bandwidth, you can choose to stick with working with just one client at a time. So you might be asking in your head, what about a business name? To this, I would say there is plenty of time to come up with a business name if you would prefer to use one. You likely have a first and last name, and you can absolutely just use your name to identify yourself as a designer. If a great business name and logo for that matter come to mind and you want to employ them, then by all means do, but please don't let not having a business name and or a logo stop you from starting on your path toward becoming a landscape designer. You can absolutely begin your journey now and add a business name and logo later. If you haven't already thought of the perfect name or logo, you don't want to get hung up in that time suck of perfecting these. Just start with actually landing a client and doing the work. The sooner you know whether or not landscape design is for you, the better. Once you get the experience that only doing the actual work can do, you will have more clarity on whether or not you want to keep pursuing the goal of becoming a landscape designer. And then, if you want to, get going on figuring out a business name and logo that would otherwise have been a waste of time if you decided to actually not go in the landscape design direction. Okay, I beat that to death. So you might also be wondering, what about your tax situation? Does starting a side hustle change your tax situation? And to this I would say, starting a side hustle will likely affect your tax situation. And I suggest scheduling a meeting with a tax pro to get their input on your individual tax situation. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you're considering diving into landscape design, you're welcome to download my Getting Started guide from my website. The link is below and it's 100% completely free. And hey, if you are considering starting or have already started a landscape design side hustle, I would love to hear about what you've had success with or what you're toiling with. If you're willing to share, please do so in the comments. This helps me understand your needs, and it also helps our greater landscape design community. So thanks again. See you for part 4 of this 6-video series. Take care.